A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I must begin by saying that how delighted I am to be here this morning with all of you, with a gathering which has the academia, which has the forest department, and my colleagues, my seniors, and a large number of people with whom I have worked, and most importantly, the young researchers and students who are in the process of embarking their career in biology, if I can say so. I must also say that my effort started about 14 months back. And I actually came to Tirupati 12 months back, just to open up a dialogue with ICER. But as luck would have it, the COVID was very strong at that point of time. And the then director and other people were suffering from that. So I actually could not visit that. But thanks to Dr. Nandini and colleagues that she has been pursuing with me that what we can do. And therefore we did not give up. And we said, okay, whatever is the little opportunity, we must begin. And I feel so happy today that this small effort that we are doing, notwithstanding all the constraints over there, is basically a step in the direction where we need to concentrate. And therefore, when I was looking at the title itself of the presentation, I said that lots of things are happening. Not that research is not happening, conservation is not happening, many things are happening, but they are, as it happens in a country, sorry to say that, in isolated manner. So we need to have a kind of a roadmap that this is what we do. And we also know the fact that there is a huge difference between the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats. 10 years back, I was at WII trying to nominate the Western Ghats on the World Heritage Site. And you know that 39 sites in the state of Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra on that coveted list. And when we started working on those dossiers, the problem was of a different kind. There was so much information that we had difficulty in putting India's case over there. You understand what I'm saying? If you look at research, if you look at thesis, if you look at dissertations, plenty. But then we were able to put it together. And I must say to you that the Western Ghat nomination was, of course, very protracted. There is a very strict process, but we were able to do it largely because scientific studies were there. That is the point I'm trying to make, that if you want to upscale the status of any area, you need to do research, you need to generate information, you need to generate both quality and comprehensive information. And that is what I now think that if we start focusing on the Eastern Ghats, we can put our act together, we can bring all areas and all parties together and see that how best we can improve on the conservation status of the Eastern Ghats. Now, as I said, it is a mixed presentation. The audience, of course, is well informed, but this single slide actually captures the status of the biodiversity in a country. 2% of the land, 8% of the species, 5% of the GDP, but 18% of the world's population. So see, our challenges are too many. And that is why I want to reach out again to ICER that well, sciences and biological sciences will remain always important. Let us not undermine the social sciences. Maybe at some stage, because we are talking of an interdisciplinary nature, you will need the help of social scientists, the economists, and the political scientists also, if we are talking about conservation. So that's that. I'm not saying it has to happen immediately, but yes, there is some dose, some exposure to social sciences has to be made to the students if we want to groom them up in a particular manner. And therefore, this again is a slide for the converts, not for the converts, that biodiversity is fundamental, whether we are talking of food security, whether we are talking of plant breeding, health, pharmaceuticals, everywhere, this science has to play a very important role. So when we talk of sustainability, when we talk of sustainable development goals, how can you ever achieve them if we don't invest in biodiversity conservation? And that is the message I want to put across, that it is an important science. It is very important. As children, we learn to become doctors and engineers. Well, nothing, no harm in that. Continue to do that. But the biological sciences have a very important role to play. If I look in the future from now, this is the science which is going to hold forth everything that we do. And the current COVID has given us complete example that if you neglect nature, if you neglect conservation, it is going to have a backlash on that. Now, coming to the Eastern Ghats again here, you can see, I mean, a lot of it, as I said, is improvement of my knowledge itself, that what is the kind, and here we are in Andhra Pradesh, 40% of the Eastern Ghat area is with you. And it is very peculiar. When I was reading it, I was myself wondering what implications it has to have a discontinuous range. Because in all my life, when I look at Himalayas, I come from Rajasthan, when I look at Aravalli, I don't actually see any discontinuity. But here, that is the point, and it has implications as well. And therefore, this is what is brings all of us together. When I came to NBA, my colleagues, Justin, Raghu, everyone said that red senders is the species. Sitting in North, sitting in Dehradun, frankly, I'm being very candid, I had not realized what is the importance. But when I started looking at the work of NBA, when we started looking at access and benefit sharing, when we started looking at the funds which come to that, then we realized that this is a species which we need to concentrate. Fortunately, there were committees in NBA who had identified that there are research gaps. So we then mounted an effort to get the best institutions in the country to flag what is needed for red senders research. And I'm very pleased to say that today, as a part of this event, we also have a session dealing with red senders, and my colleagues from different parts of the country with very reputed institutions are going to come and present what they have been doing. Because this species has tremendous potential, in not only in conservation terms, but also in economic terms. We will have a glimpse of it even once I stop here. There will be something to be shown to you. But the point is that this species is very important. And I now think that in the first phase, we followed a process. We got the PIs, we got the institutions interested, they've done it. But in the last 3 to 4 years, this research will also lead to subsequent questions. See, no research can solve all questions in one go. And that is where, when I talked to Dr. Nandini, I said that we must hear our scientists. They would be now in a position to tell us that what they've been able to achieve and what they need to do further. And that gap between further, see, question begets questions. Earlier, there were questions of different kinds. Now there are questions of different kinds. So how can chemical sciences, how can molecular sciences, and ICER is the place where all these sciences are being dealt with. So my interest is that our PIs, our scientists who are working should be able to flag that these are further areas of research. Well, their own institutions, their own scientists, their own colleagues can take it up, but we can also look at our colleagues in ICER, our students in ICER, who, as Professor Ramesh just explained, ample opportunities are there in terms of MSc dissertations, in terms of PhD projects and so on. So then we don't lose momentum. And I'm sure my colleagues at NBA will understand that finding a part of funding to support research on red senders will not be very difficult on the part of NBA, as long as it is relevant, it generates information, and it helps to the overall conservation of that. So I do understand that there is a very strong protection issue. My colleagues in the forest department, we made sure that they come and attend this session because they have their own story to tell. Because protection is important, what measures are required, but we need to look at both sides. We need to look at the protection side. We need to look at the research side. Then only a species like red senders can be helped. And then, of course, there are other species. Everybody knows the story of Jordan's courser and so on. I must also say that this decade is the UN decade for ecological restoration. The United Nations has declared that for a 10-year period, and anything which is now degraded, which needs to be restored, can also be taken up. So please let your imaginations run very high and wild, that if you think a particular area needs to be restored, those projects also can be taken up. It is the first time that the global community is being made to understand that restoration is important. See, you can't stop the impacts. Impacts will happen, whether you build a road or you mine or you do anything, but we forget that restoration is also possible. So in this debate in the country, when we talk of conservation versus development, it's not that we can have only conservation, not development. You have development, but also open up areas and avenues for restoration. So if something gets bad or impaired, we can do that. I've already said the story that they are much less explored, and the only answer is to explore in whatever means you can do. And I am saying that from your weekend trips, I narrate to you the story of WII. See, we encourage very early on students that if you have a weekend, if you have a holiday, you can just go to nearby Rajaji National Park, spend some time in the forest, do your bird counts, walk on the transect, count the gorals, count this, count that. That is how you actually develop a culture. And that is what is very important, sir, for ICER, that you need to inculcate and develop a culture. You just said that all 5 years, all your students are taught chemistry, biology, botany, zoology, everything. And as a part of a simple weekend, you're right now at the heart. In a half-an-hour drive, you can reach a place and you can start developing baselines and interest. See, the more important part is interest. So once a student, a young student gets interested that yes, there is something in nature and there is a kind of a fascination when you go on a morning walk, then these people are automatically going to build up their own proposals, their own careers and so on. So initially in WII, we were trying to run to the student and say, look, this is an opportunity, do you want to take it? Now in the last 10, 15 years, it's the students who drive us and say, no, we want this particular aspect to be studied. And fortunately for an academic scientific institution, all research are valid. But today again, let me come back. This gathering of forest officers and of academia and scientists, we want to hear from the forest department, from my colleagues in the forest service, that what is their idea of the gap in research. We are going to have a focus group discussion later in the day. You need to spell out that this is what we need. We know this, this, and this, but we do not know this, and this. Then we need to pose this question to our academia and say that what parts you can take up, what is that which is of interest. And obviously, we need to keep in mind the interest. See, this is not a bureaucratic process that if I am given a file, I have to write something on that file. Research doesn't happen like that. Research has to have an interest, research has to have an expertise. And that is where my request to forest department colleagues is that we need to listen out to them. We need to work out a way. And no research, see, let me spend 30 seconds on that. When we joined, everybody said research are of two kinds. Research is a pure research is an academic research, and research is an applied research. But believe me, that distinction is very artificial. You cannot say this is academic, this is applied. How can you do applied work without investing your time in basic or fundamental research? So these are the kind of things, and that's why I feel that compared to any university, the ICER systems are much better placed, because that is what the originators and who established ICER had in mind, that we must talk of integration. And we must try to bring in all sciences together and see that how a particular issue can be solved. And obviously, when I was looking at it, I am very pleased to say that this NVIS Center is very, very important. A huge amount of documentation is available over there, and they've been for years doing in whatever resources they have over there. The other part, I must say, is relating to tribal communities over here. See, when we talk of conservation, you cannot escape or cannot ignore the human dimension of conservation. Plants are important, no doubt. Animals are important, but the human dimension is very important. And we have a large number of tribal communities from Koyas to Kondas to whatever else living over here, whose life has evolved with these systems over there. So at any point of time, because with this is livelihood. See, one of the biggest questions which is raised against conservation is, how does conservation promote livelihood? Half the time we are defending in forest department saying that we are not taking away the livelihoods of people by setting up of national park and sanctuaries. But we need to look at it in a broader way, that how can conservation help in generating livelihoods? So then we can have a win-win situations over there. And that is where the last part which I want to come is that what is that we need to do to protect and preserve these resources? And that is where this document which you see, the Biological Diversity Act, way back in 2002, our country, our government enacted this act, and we have a mandate to see the implementation. And I was just telling Professor Ramesh that if you look at the definition of biological resource, plants, animals, microorganisms, so everything is covered over there. So if in ICER labs you are setting up a facility or a sophisticated facility of dealing with molecular sciences or anything else to do with that, that is also very, very important for all of us. So moving a little further, oops. Check that. Doesn't want to go further? You can move it if it is. It talks of also three things. It talks of conservation, it talks of benefit sharing, it talks of sustainable use. So my point of saying all this is that we need to take conservation in a very holistic manner. You move ahead and you, no, move back, 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 back. Not moving. Back, back, back. Huh? It's working? Okay. So anyway, I'll take a few more minutes because these ideas are very germane to the long-term plan that we are trying to develop. Everybody, access, everybody wants to get into our area. You have a forest, you have a resource, people want to get into it. We have no issue with getting into it, but access is linked to sharing of benefits. And that is where the Biological Diversity Act, that is where the NBA, that is where the SBBs come into picture that we need. That's a very, very important part of that. And as I said a few minutes earlier, that local communities are involved in this area. They're involved everywhere, but more so in the Western Ghats, in the Eastern Ghats, and therefore we need to take care of them. Let me forget about the functions. Let me come back to something else. See, this is what, Professor Ramesh, I want to draw your attention. We have a panchayat system. We have a local body system. Each local body is supposed to prepare a document called a People's Biodiversity Register or PBR. Okay. So this approach is basically we need to document. As you said in your first, in your introduction, inventorization. So how is that inventorization going to happen? And I am talking of inventorization of all resources in every single inch of territory of India. And if you take that, we have the biodiversity management committees set up all over the country, 2,77,000. Each has to prepare this register. And I want to come to you that what it contains. So all those things that you have talked about, all the taxonomic groups, whether you're talking of aquatic bodies, whether you're talking of forests or wasteland or pasture, wild animal, plants, including traditional knowledge, are all a part of that document. Okay. But let me show you this picture then. This is a slide from Kerala. The most advanced stage as far as documentation of resources is concerned. These are all the people's biodiversity registers made from Kerala. My colleague Justin has been involved in making several of them. But you can see, while we can take pride that these are documented, but they are all paper-based. And you can see the limitation, what is there if somebody hands you a 200-page document, what can you do with that? So therefore, if you look at the bottom line, our current effort is transition of PBR into ePBR, electronic PBR. And you know how our country is moving into the digital world. If the information is digitized, and that is where again my ICER students, researchers, faculty comes in. That today, no information, even if you want, nobody writes in a hand or this thing, but we need to have a proper transition to an electronic form. We are trying to develop a framework. We are working with the NIC. We are working with NIC Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, all states. But eventually, we should be able to do it so that we have a much better idea of our resources. And these resources are also for commercial use. So it's not that we are just documenting it for the purpose of documentation. You produce whatever scientific publication you want out of that. And this is all leading to big data set, because imagine the number of replicates that you will have. So this is what we are trying to do. Just to let you know, it is the local community which helps it, but students and teachers, I have written it, they are not currently engaged, but that is the vision for the future. That we pick up an area, you start, as they say, charity begins at home. Even if you look at your own Tirupati city, you will find out, we will let you know what biodiversity management committees are there, where it is there, where it is not there, we can do that. We can tie up with the voluntary organizations over here. Colleague is speaking from WWF today. And of course, there will be knowledgeable individuals. So see, these are the kind of data sources. That is where our young scientists are also to understand. It's not only you generate data when you walk on a transect. There are 1,000 other ways to do that. And that is where you need to pull in together to bring this over there. And then you know why it is required. It is the documentation at the village level. The local ownership is there. See, unless and every resource is tied with the ownership, that who is owning that resource. It could be a Gram Sabha, it could be a village common land, it could be with the forest department over there. And then you understand that development projects are coming. A road is coming through a patch of my area, and I need to negotiate with the government. I need to do an impact analysis and say that if you bring this road here, this is what is going to happen. These are my resources which will get affected. And you have a documentary proof. So there is a very strong legal protection. And that is the beauty of the Biological Diversity Act, that once it gets into it, believe me, nobody can easily upturn that, what is in that resource over there. I just mentioned that we are already in the process of digitizing this information over there. Okay, I can skip these. Okay, now coming back to the challenges, not that for this audience I'm saying, but there is a tremendous stress on our system. There is a tremendous level of degradation which is going on. And obviously human greed, population pressures, unsustainable. Haphazard mining. See, mining per se is not bad, provided you do in a responsible manner, provided you link it up with a restoration. You will have to do some earthwork, you will have to remove those resources, but you can also restore them. So this is what we need to weave out a story from here. Obviously, we cannot manage what we do not know. So if you do no documentation at this level, and that is where I must say to you that India's model of governance is the best model in the world. If we call it a 3-tier model system, we have the NBA, we have the State Biodiversity Board, all 28 of them, all 8 Union Territory Biodiversity Councils. But at the grassroots level, we have these biodiversity management committees. Those are the ones which are involved in resource governance and management. And that is where we need to look at. Finally, this is my last slide, gap analysis. See, the best thing which the scientific community can do, sitting in ICER departments, labs, and so on. I'm not naming any taxonomic group. We may name red senders, we may name a particular species of bird or animal, but we need to do all major taxonomic group gap analysis. And you remember what I said for the Western Ghats, we should have the same kind of a profile for the Eastern Ghats. It may not happen in 1 year, but it will happen over the period of years. Then we need to bring in convergence. The academia sitting here, the forest department sitting here, they need to spell out that what is their need and how the academia can respond. And last of my slide, especially to Professor Ramesh, and when I meet your director tomorrow or whenever, ICER systems, governance, management, and research. Permit me to say that, sir, if governance is not supportive, nothing can happen. If the management is not supportive, nothing can happen. Researchers can do something, but they need to be supported up. We need to step up our engagement. And I am offering you whatever NBA can do, whatever my colleagues in the forest department can do, whatever state biodiversity boards can do, we should do that. I think that is finally I wanted to say. Thank you.